Alright, so first up, I just want to let you know that if any of these guys get their hands on your girl, your relationship is done. Remember that. Devil May Cry 5 released in 2019, and up to this day is still one of the best action adventure games you could pick up and play today. If you ask me, DMC5 is one of the most underrated games ever made, and you can clearly see that Hideaki Itsuno and Tatsuya Yoshikawa fulfilled their vision, because this game is so mind-blowing and everything about it, from the main menu to the combat to the cutscenes, is a massive W for modern games. This game deserves a lot more love than it has received, and it's nothing less than a masterpiece. If anyone thinks that this game is trash, or if you don't think it's a masterpiece, feel free to make a solid statement why you disagree down in the comments. I'll be down there waiting, and if you haven't played this game, go and play it and then come back. You do not have my permission to watch this video if you have not played DMC5 or if you haven't subscribed. The combat system in DMC5 has been the pinnacle of fighting mechanics in video games up to the end of the PS4 era and up to the first few years of the PS5 era. If a game ever takes the title of best combat system, I'll come back and leave a pinned comment on this video, although I don't expect a game to have more exciting and intense combat than this game until DMC6 comes out. The fighting system in Devil May Cry 5 is simply a refinement and improvement on the combat from all the prequels that came before it, straight back to DMC1. The combos you can pull off in this game are mind-blowing once you hit Triple S until it's like you're going beyond that. Double Trigger mode is sweet as usual, and it's one of my favorite parts of the combat in the series overall. That's when the game really makes you feel like a god, and I love it. So when a game can blow my mind and stand out after the hundreds of games I've played throughout my life, that alone says something about the game, or that aspect of it at the very least. Like, I wouldn't say DMC1 has the best combat just because I love it, nah, simply because it took a large accumulation of tiny refinements over many sequels for the combat in Devil May Cry 5 to be so smooth and this good. The fighting system alone in DMC5 is enough to carry this game up to the masterpiece status in my opinion, and I'm willing to defend that to my grave. The audio in DMC5 is top notch, crispy and clean, some of the best in the industry. I'm talking about every sound and sound effect in general when I say this. From hearing Virgil and Dante swinging their swords, you can get a sense of weight from their sword, as well as the sound effects that Virgil's sword swings have, and just his moves in general sound different from Dante's, because we all know that Dante uses a big long heavy greatsword, like the Rebellion, that can split a man in two with one swing without much effort, while Virgil primarily uses a thin katana named the Yamato, which allows him greater mobility and could definitely split a man with one swing. But when you see Virgil pulling off moves like the Yamato combo C and rapid slash, he doesn't make it look like it. The sound effect of judgment cuts are crazy and they all sound sharp. The soundtrack is one of the best I've ever heard in a game, to be honest. Like, I listen to a lot of Devil May Cry soundtracks when I'm at the gym sometimes and so on. The Devil Trigger track and the remixes, any special orders, Bury the Light, and any DMC soundtrack you can name is a banger, including Subhuman. The visuals in Devil May Cry 5 are so beautiful. I don't know what it is about the aesthetic that I love so much. I don't know if it's the lighting or if it's the colors they used or just the particle effects in general, but something about the visuals in DMC5 is just so sweet. This game was made in the Reach for the Moon engine, aka the RE engine, which was made in 2014, originally designed for Capcom's Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, a game that I played and enjoyed as well, but not half as much, not even 25% as much as Devil May Cry 5. The game is just a beauty to look at, and sometimes I turn on this game just to look at it and then I turn it back off again. One of the greatest things about the visual presentation and graphics of DMC5 is that the game isn't reliant on it or leaning on it too much to bring it to that masterpiece status. The game looks good because it can look good. It doesn't look good because it needs to have the best graphics or nobody will buy it, like Horizon Forbidden West. Nah, Devil May Cry 5 delivers on every aspect of the visuals, and the sparkling appearance is just a plus to the whole package. To me, it seems like nowadays, game studios struggle to make memorable characters, and a lot of these characters in DMC5 were present in earlier titles, so not all of them came out of this game specifically. But the way they're presented is done in such a way that even if I was new to this series, like if Devil May Cry 5 was the first DMC game that I played, I would have still loved these characters just as much as I love them now. And the cutscenes do a good job in making me care about them and what happens to them. I love when a game can do this because it makes me more motivated to play it. The characters and the combat are the soul of Devil May Cry, if you ask me, and seeing Dante is like seeing an old friend you haven't seen in years, and it's like you're glad because his character didn't change for the worse, although it's like he wasn't feeling too motivated before V showed up. You can obviously tell he's gotten older, and I think it's kind of weird that they made Dante look significantly older but Virgil still looks young, but then again he was reborn, so I guess it would kind of make sense in a way. Speaking of Virgil, after such a long time he's back from a streak of suffering and hardship, reclaimed his sword while at the same time ripping off his son's arm only to end up causing trouble for Dante again. Virgil has become an iconic character because of the way he was presented in DMC5, but I still gotta give Dante that extra 1% of respect because of the way he makes Virgil, the coolest character in all of gaming, look like a clown. Then there's Nero, the son of Virgil, and personally I'm not the biggest fan of Nero, not because I dislike his character or anything like that, but it's like there's nothing really special about him. Like, he just doesn't seem original and he seems like he lacks identity. He likes the pop jokes like Dante, and I would expect him to be like Dante if he grew up around him, but considering he grew up away from his family and has had many experiences without them, especially in his formative years, I would expect him to be a bit different from Dante. What I want them to do with Nero is have some sort of time skip where he's a lot older and different, but at the same time I want them to do it in a way that Virgil and Dante don't get too old to fight or be unplayable, because I still want them to be a part of the story. Like, maybe a future version of Nero could come back in time and help Dante and Virgil. I think that would be really cool, but I just don't really care about Nero or like his fighting mechanics, and I genuinely want to. I think he's just too watered down. However, I do like how his devil trigger looks, that's all. V could have been so much more in my opinion, but I still think his character was decent for the most part. Not really a fan of his combat style though. Nico is another standout character. I think she's really funny and good looking. Other than that, there isn't really much I can say about her other than that I want to see her in every Devil May Cry game going forward. She respects Dante and pairs well with Nero, so she's good in my book. And then you have Trish, looking like an old toad and looser than ever. Not really a fan of how they made her look this time around, but she is getting old, so at the end of the day it's only natural. I think she should dress her age, to be honest. Maybe wear a long coat like Dante. She just looks so gross. There's also Morrison. I gotta respect that guy because of the way he handles certain situations. You can see he's real slick and you can tell he's the type of guy who knows how to make things happen. Not really familiar with him, but I think he is a good addition to the Devil May Cry story and I would like to see him in future games as well. I heard he's in the anime, but I don't really remember seeing him in Devil May Cry 1, 3 or 4, so he's kinda new to me. And by the looks of things, he's been working with Dante for a while. Like, he's the guy who gets the contracts for Dante. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about Lady. Yeah, she looks nice as well, and I mean, she didn't really do anything for the plot, but she was there. It's a good thing she's still around, and hopefully she might be more useful in a sequel. Maybe get some new moves and be a decent character at some point in the future. One thing I love about the weapons in DMC5 and just the series as a whole is that the weapons aren't just some random weapons. Like, it's not Dante's sword or Virgil's sword or Dante's gun. Nah, that's not the case. The weapons in Devil May Cry 5 each mean something to the person wielding it. They all have names and they all have a story, and that's why I appreciate them so much. Dante's pistols, Ebony and Ivory, are just legendary. He's got tons of other guns added to his arsenal as well, like the shotgun, rocket launcher, and Dr. Frost, a hat that Nico made. The best thing about it is that it makes Dante feel like Michael Jackson. Then onto Dante's sword, you got the Rebellion, Sword of Sparta, Devil Sword Dante being his new primary weapon by the end of DMC5. It looks cool and it suits him. The most outrageous weapon in the whole game is Dante's motorbike, the Cavalier. It's something I wouldn't expect, and that's why it's so sick. My favorite weapon by far is the Katana Yamato. I love that blade, it's so fun to use as well. Virgil's Beowulf gauntlets are so satisfying to use, originally introduced in DMC3. Mirage Edge is by far the most beautiful weapon in the game, but the main thing I love about it is that it has the million stab and overdrive techniques that come with it. There's also Nero's weapons, his sword Red Queen and the Devil Breakers that Nico made for him. A couple of them are kinda cool, and he also has a gun called Blue Rose, but like I said before, I'm not really a fan of Nero, neither am I a fan of his weapons or how they function. Even though I'm not a fan of Nero, I don't dislike him, but I do dislike his fighting style and combos. I just wanted to make that clear. The rest of the weapons in Devil May Cry 5, they're all okay, but I mainly just wanted to highlight the ones that I think are my favorite, as well as Nero's weapons, because he might be the future of the Devil May Cry series, whether I like it or not. The atmosphere of Devil May Cry 5 feels dark and very similar to what you would find in a Souls-like game, but only this time it's a version of London destroyed and uprooted by the Demon Tree. The environments inside of the Demon Tree feel like the underworld, to be honest. It feels like a completely different dimension once the story goes inside the Demon Tree. There isn't much going on for the environment in terms of sound effects. You can hear bits of rubble crumble in the background and stuff like that. The only thing I would have added to the atmosphere is just some stronger wind sound effects, but apart from that that I think is solid, and that's just a minor nitpick because I didn't miss any of that in my first playthrough or my second playthrough. The atmosphere is perfectly fine for this version of Devil May Cry, especially considering that hyper detailed environments have never really been DMC's focus anyway. The story of DMC5, while it isn't the deepest story and it's not really on the Witcher 3 level in terms of depth, but I'm totally fine with that, and I love how straightforward and simple it is, not too complicated, and the cutscenes don't drown you in useless details and bits of pieces about the story that you're gonna forget about a lot of the time. Most of the cutscenes focus more on the characters, and they do a good job in making you care about them. Honestly, I would definitely take a Netflix series with the same visual style. I think a Netflix series based on this version of Devil May Cry, the same type of dialogue, the same type of story, I would definitely watch that, and I would love to see that, and that's why I'm so glad for the anime. I don't want this franchise to go away anytime soon. I want the story to continue. I also like the fact that the story touches on the theme of sibling rivalry, because that's something I can relate to personally, and it's just a real thing, because sometimes even when siblings grow up they still don't get along, and when they're in each other's company it's like they seem so immature because of that rivalry. It's just a clash of personalities. I love the story of DMC5, especially because it's connected to the first one. It's all connected, so what you're seeing in DMC5 is just a piece of a greater story. When it comes to the enemies in this game, I think the majority of them are decent for the most part, because at the end of the day, in a hack and slash game like this, you're gonna need some trash mobs, but I do wish there were a bit more enemy types similar to Proto and Scudo Angelo, which brings me to the bosses. Most of the bosses in DMC5 slap. There are only like 2 of them that I don't really like, but the fact that there's variety in the bosses makes this game even better, I would say. Most of the bosses are great, and having Virgil and Dante as a final boss makes this game slap even harder. I just love when the final boss is as cool as the main character. What I want for the future of the Devil May Cry series is maybe a bit more openness to the world and maybe a bit more depth to the world. Not so they can fill it with garbage to pad out game time, but because I am interested and invested in the world of DMC. Like, I want to know what Dante's regular contracts are like and his regular life slaying devils. I'm not saying they should add a bunch of filler content, but if they can somehow bring some high quality side quests, I would appreciate that, because I want to know more about this world and the people that live in it and the events that take place when a giant tree ain't grown through the whole city. Also, I think that Capcom really needs to make an arena fighter out of the fighting mechanics that they have for Devil May Cry, or at least an arena fighter mode in DMC6 where we can have some PvP, because Devil May Cry could seriously benefit from that, especially considering how underrated the series is. And I'm not talking about mods. There's only one thing I genuinely dislike about DMC5, and that's how short it is, but only because the gaps between each release are so huge. What I'm saying is I want more high quality content for DMC, and that's why Devil May Cry 5 is a masterpiece.